Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business, continuing my conversation with U.S. Senator Rand Paul. He's running for the Republican nomination for president. And, it seems like Donald Trump is about all we hear about. Now we're hearing a little bit about Ted Cruz. It's a bizarre political environment. It's kind of like people with political science degrees these days are almost like people with computer science degrees in the 1970s, or 80s rather. It's like, what do you do with these? Everything has changed entirely. One thing we don't hear a lot about is ground game, because that's how people get elected, is that retail style of politics and the ground game. Kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what Rand Paul's strategy is for winning this nomination.
We think we have one of the best ground games in Iowa and New Hampshire. We announced just last week that we have 1,000 precinct chairmen in Iowa. This is the largest announced precinct chair, and there are about 1,600 precincts in Iowa, so we have two-thirds of them filled with our supporters and are working to rapidly try to fill the rest. No other campaign has had a ground game where they can announce that many precinct chairs. We have chairmen in all 99 counties in Iowa, and we have a lot of young people and enthusiasm trying to turn out the vote. Our headquarters is filled with hundreds of young people making phone calls, and people have come from all over the country to help us. We've also organized all 20 college campuses in Iowa, as well as over 350 college campuses around the country. So we think that a lot of younger voters agree with us that the government really shouldn't be collecting all of our phone records and collecting all of our credit card statements, and that invasion of privacy is something that shouldn't happen unless a judge has a warrant with your name on it. So we think we're going to do very well with the youth vote. We think the youth vote is underrepresented in the polling, and we're hoping to still shock some people once the election comes in a few weeks.
Does your strategy depend heavily on Super Tuesday? I would assume it does.
Yeah, a lot of it really is in February. I think a lot of campaigns have to do well. So we think we have to do very well in Iowa and very well in New Hampshire, and we're putting a lot of energy, and a lot of my time is traveling to the first two states. But I've been to over 40 states. We're on the ballot in all 50 states. So we have a thriving and growing campaign.
Mm-hmm. What would you say, besides the fact that it's heavily geared towards young people, which to me seems so logical, what are some other things that makes your campaign unique? Obviously, your message as well.
Well, we also think that the message appeals to independents as well as Liberty voters. And the Liberty voters comprise maybe not a majority of Republican voters, but that's a growing segment. This is a segment of voters that believes in criminal justice reform, that kids deserve a second chance if they make mistakes, that we shouldn't permanently prevent people from seeking employment or being able to vote if they made a youthful problem with drugs or some other kind of crime like that. And so I think that opens us up to a whole new group of voters that may or may not have been Republicans in the past, but it also helps the Republican Party to grow, to show that we have some compassion for people who have made youthful mistakes. We also think that the discussion, particularly in the last presidential debate, of regime change, whether or not it's a good idea to topple Assad in Syria, will that make us safer? Will it make terrorism greater? These are really important debates to have, and I've been arguing for a couple of years that it's a mistake to give arms to the Islamic rebels in Syria, because a lot of those arms are finding their ways into the hands of ISIS, and also because if you bomb Assad or insist that Assad must go, I think it allows ISIS to grow, and it gives them a place to grow. And I'm concerned if you topple Assad that you may well have ISIS in charge of all Syria, and that would be a worse scenario than what we have now.
Yeah, I think there's truth to that. We got to take another break here. When we come back to it, I want to talk a little bit in our final segment together about your foreign policy, because, there seems to be two extremes operating, one of which this idea of the U.S. as an ostrich and stick his head in the sand, and this idea of the United States being the world's cop. And to me, there seems to be a third way, and I think your foreign policy epitomizes that. I want to talk about that and a few other items here on The Price of Business. Again, U.S. Senator Rand Paul, he is a guest on today's program. Delighted to have him here on the program. We're going to have more for you after this on The Price of Business.